With classes coming to a close, the Pirates are in full swing. Angie Churchill, in her inaugural season, has the Pirates at 500 with a few weeks left before the Big East tournament. With up and down games this year, where this team has been on both sides, the right and the wrong side of routes this season, can they find consistency as the UConn Huskies, the top of the conference, come down to South Orange this weekend? The baseball team that's had a rough start to the season, to say the least, have found season-flipping highlights in non-conference play this season. But as they head to Creighton this weekend, have the Pirates only found fool's gold? And even in the offseason, men's basketball continues to make headlines. With Jay Wright's surprising retirement, who will take the mantle of the top of the Big East? My panel will discuss all this and more. I'm Christian Gardner, and this is Hall Talk. Welcome back into Hall Talk. I'm now joined by the most talented here, the Wilnir Lewis and Heaven Hill guys. How are we doing? It's been a fun week.
I mean, it's really been a great week. We get to come here and talk about some baseball, talk about some softball. And John Rothstein said that we sleep in May. It's April right now, and we got some Seton Hall men's basketball news as well. So overall, it's been a really tremendous week.
Yeah, Christian, I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to discuss some Seton Hall softball as the softball team is really starting to turn it around after a rough season last year.
Well, Heaven, we're going to get into that in a second because the headlines kind of flipped in this past week. Jay Wright, out of nowhere seemingly, has retired from coaching at Villanova. And for a while, this man has been quite the pinnacle for the Big East. Guys, I just want to get your initial reaction when you heard that this was a possibility and then eventually getting the actual retirement from Jay Wright. Heaven, we'll start with you, man.
Man, I mean, Jay Wright, he's the best coach, in my opinion, in Big East history. I mean, the job he was able to do at Villanova over the years, they were a consistent thorn, not just in the Pirates side, but in everybody's side. You know, they knew they had a strict philosophy, and you knew every year they were going to make a deep run in March, you know, coming away with a couple national championships. So this past season, regardless of who left, whether it was Jeremiah Robinson Earl to the NBA and previous players that have left, you knew they were going to be talented every season. So with the news of him leaving, it's shattering to the hierarchy of the Big East. You know, now you have UConn and Seton Hall and Creighton, teams that were in the tournament last year, Marquette as well. Now with Jay Wright gone, who's going to be the big dog in the conference? Who's going to step up and claim that mantle? Who's going to be the leader? And that's not to say, you know, Villanova's going to fall off because, I mean, Coach Neptune for them, he was on the coaching staff at Villanova for several years, and who's to say Villanova even falls off? But it's definitely crazy to think now that Jay Wright won't be on the sidelines for Villanova anymore.
Yeah, and I think the craziest part about it was the fact that it came in the offseason that he, you know, retiring right then and there. We saw this whole season with Coach K, you know, he having himself his retirement tour, you know, didn't end the way that he would have wanted it to. But, you know, for Jay Wright, that was a guy that, you know, had a lot of respect not only in the Big East, but in all of college basketball, being on the cover of GQ, you know, being able to win those national champions. It was a great thing for Villanova, and I think what also you have to credit Jay Wright with is culture that he brought down in Villanova. You talk about a lot of these one-and-done blue blood schools, you know, like Duke, like Kentucky, but you knew Villanova was always going to be up there as a blue blood, and that's not because you know, they had the top recruits, even though Villanova did have a couple of great recruits, but they weren't getting like the number one recruited, number two recruit in the nation. They were building that program. They were developing players. They were having players stay in 2-3 years and really, you know, embody the program. Colin Gillespie was a perfect example of it these past couple of years. So it's really crazy to think about Jay Wright leaving the Big East and leaving college basketball as a whole because he has been a staple. And to think over the past couple of months, just all the college basketball coaches that we've seen, you know, retire or leave, especially now in the Big East, it's really turning a new tide, specifically on the conference, to probably a newer Big East.
And let's talk about what that vacuum can be right now. I think the entire conference is seeing when you see a championship coach, two-time champion, and a Final Four appearance in this past year, it's now a complete new era in the Big East. Now, do you see another coach taking that same mantle, or Will, like you're saying, a complete new era?
I think overall, these first couple of years is going to be a complete new era just because of how many new coaches coming into the Big East. I mean, you look at Ed Cooley, I believe, is now the longest tenured Big East coach. So you might look at him, but Providence is, a team already going to be able to replicate the success that they had this past year. So I think overall, in terms of a specific coach that will be able to take that mantle, I think it's going to be a couple of years before you're really able to see that just because of how many new coaches came in. But I think it's going to make a very fun and exciting conference, a conference that can really bring in a lot of potential new eyes to college basketball for people that, that still don't watch college basketball during the regular season or anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as a new coach or a new team stepping up, like Will said, there's just so many potential candidates. I mean, you said Ed Cooley in Providence, obviously Dan Hurley in UConn, Butler bringing in Thad Matta. I mean, that's just a huge acquisition in itself. Shaka Smart and Marquette, the job that they were able to do this past season. And then, of course, Shaheen Holloway returned to Seton Hall. I mean, there's just so many candidates, and really, I could see any of them stepping up and reclaiming that top spot. But like I said before, we can't count out Villanova either because Coach Neptune, I mean, the job that he was able to do there, and I mean, now with Jay Wright leaving, it's not just Villanova's not just going to disappear. They're not just going to fall from first in the conference all the way to eighth or something. This is going to be the same Villanova team with the same philosophies and the cultures because that's what was built up over the past several years that Jay Wright was there. So it's going to be interesting to see just who steps up and takes that top spot.
And I think everyone that's watching this show will want to say it's Shaheen Holloway. But moving forward, let's talk about this early on program for Shaheen Holloway. Things have been all but quiet here in South Orange. When you're talking about an era of college basketball where it's all about the transfers, not so much has been said so far within this program. Is that a bit of a concern for you? How do you feel that this team, as we're looking toward 2022-2023, is assembled right now?
You know what, Christian? I would say it's not concerning. It's just, it's interesting, let's say, because there's been a lot of movement, but not that much on the Seton Hall front. Like you had Coach Billmeyer leave and Coach Copeland and Coach Woodward, so almost the entire staff is gone from last year. And then in terms of players, I mean, just today at this time of recording, Ryan Conway entered the transfer portal. We received news that Tyrese Samuel's going to be back next year. Brandon Weston potentially going to be back. So it's Trey Jackson. He's going to be back next year as well. So it's interesting. It's just, it's surprising that we haven't had a transfer commit yet, considering last year the impact that Alexis Yetna and Jameer Harris were able to make. But, again, the offseason is still young, so who's to say, in a couple weeks or so this isn't the case. But as of now, with the coaches leaving and the player movement happening around the nation, it's quiet on the front right now. It's a little eerie, let's say.
I think it is interesting, but I think Shaheen Holloway is, speaking quietly but walking with a big stick, essentially. And I think that the case being is, there's probably a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. I think he is probably speaking with a lot of transfers. And, it was only today, at the time of recording, where we finally got news of at least two out of the three assistant coaches that will be under his staff. 2 coaches that was with Shaheen at St. Peter's coming over here to Seton Hall. And, I think that at first you kind of really wanted to, at least for Shaheen, just be able to certify that staff and be able to get the paperwork done, being able to have them have their signatures on the paper that they'll be coming to Seton Hall. And I think from there is when we're really going to start seeing, those transfers starting to come in. I think Ryan Conway leaving to go to the transfer portal, I think that's probably going to be the first big domino to fall. And, within the next week, 2 weeks, I think now you're going to be able to start seeing a lot more news starting to come with Seton Hall. But I think for Shaheen, it was just let's finalize everything first, and then now we're going to be able to move from there.
Yeah, when you're starting a new regime, it takes a little bit to get everything going, get all of that new staff in order, and it's a lot for Shaheen to figure out as he's been a very public figure so far here at Seton Hall, going to baseball games and all of that. But that's going to lead us over to the Diamond as we're going to head over to softball right now. A very successful team right now as opposed to previous years here with the Seton Hall Pirates at 17-17. Have had a lot of success, but like I said in the rundown, fellas, it's been an up and down kind of year, and right there at 500, but still towards the bottom of the Big East. What kind of grade would you give as we're halfway through the season right now? What grade would you give for this team and to focus on for the season so far? Will, we'll start with you.
I think in terms of a grade, I would definitely go either C plus B minus, because I think that the expectations for this squad was, very low to come into the season. I had mentioned that this is going to be an exciting team to watch, but I didn't expect them to, fully be as successful as they are right now, standing at 500, 34 games in the season. So I think that being able to be 17-17, being able to be 500, being able to be competitive in the Big East, is definitely a bright side for this softball team. You're seeing a lot of the freshmen step up. Most recently, Taylor Hill being the Big East Player of the Week and the Big East Freshman of the Week. So you're seeing the freshmen starting to develop a little bit more. You're seeing some of the underclassmen. Sydney Babbitt has been pretty good in the circle for this softball team as well. So you're getting a lot of the younger contributors to really step up big in Big East play. And I think with that, you have a first-year head coach. So the expectations coming into the season wasn't high, but I think as of right now, you're exceeding expectations. How high you're exceeding expectations is a question, which is why I say C plus B minus, but I think overall a pretty good season nonetheless.
You know what, Christian? He might have said C plus B minus. I'm going with an A, honestly. This has been a massive turnaround from last season. I mean, they went 9-23 last year, and now through 34 games, they're 17-17. They picked up a series win last weekend over Georgetown. They had a win over Rutgers as well. And like Will said, it's been the younger players stepping up, on offense especially, whether it's Jenna Blevins or Lauren Kai or Taylor Hill, who, like Will just mentioned, was the Big East Player and Big East Freshman of the Week. I mean, we saw it with the soccer team in the fall, how many freshman contributors were able to help out for the women's soccer team. And now we're seeing it with the softball team. It's just been a massive turnaround offensively. And like Will said, with a first-year head coach in Angie Churchill, I mean, 9-23 last year to 500 this year, I feel like that's massively exceeding expectations. I mean, yeah, they had some players come back, namely Janae Barricado, but just getting players to buy in to a first-year coach and then seeing the positive results now for them to have such a massive turnaround. I mean, they almost have as many wins this season as they had in the past 2 years combined. They went 9-23 last year. The year before that, they were 10-14. So just a huge turnaround. For that, I give them an A.
I completely agree with you. The expectations for this team were not as high. When you're talking about a complete roster turnover and all these new faces of how well they have played together, but I have to look towards Wilnir's side of things as we look towards UConn now, because now we have to lose those rose-colored glasses as you're taking a top-of-the-conference team here at home. So, guys, what are some of those keys for a big series for this Pirates team to continue to deliver on the A-plus grade for you, Heaven?
I mean, I think it's simple. You have to match the Huskies offensively. Throughout the year, UConn has been tremendous on offense. I mean, they've got, I think, 107 stolen bases, and the team is second in the Big East has 43. I mean, they're really talented offensively. They're extremely dominant, and it shows as they've just been crushing teams with, I believe, a 15-3 record in conference play. So as far as a key to victory for the Pirates, you have to match them offensively. And the Pirates can do that. I mean, we've seen them this season, multiple games with double-digit runs. I mean, they lead the conference in doubles. They're fifth in the nation in doubles per game. Taylor Hill, if she wants to have the performance that she had against Georgetown this week as well, the Pirates are going to need it, as every run counts against the Huskies.
Yeah, I think, Heaven, you bring up excellent points. I mean, this is a UConn team right now, 3 games ahead of Villanova in the standings at 15-3 in conference play. UConn has had Seton Hall's number throughout their program's history, 17-14 is the record for Seton Hall against UConn. So the odds are against Seton Hall right now. So I think in the most basic fashion, you just got to go out there and have fun. This is a softball team that we see, that they could perform well, that they could hit the ball pretty well as well. They could get great pitching out of Shelby Smith, Sydney Babbitt. So I think it's going to be all hands on deck type of thing for Seton Hall to at least keep it competitive against UConn. Again, UConn is a tremendous team in softball, a tremendous team in the Big East. So for Seton Hall, like you mentioned, Christian, it's going to be a tall task, but you go out there, you have fun, you don't be too tight, and overall just perform the way that you've been able to perform in those 17 games that you're able to get a couple wins.
Now, fellas, any type of series prediction for this? Any type of MVP for the Pirates this weekend? Will, we'll start with you, man.
I think MVP, I'm going to go Shelby Smith. I think that she is going to find a way to be, dominant on both ends in the circle as well as, in the batter's box. I think that she will have a great performance for Seton Hall because I feel like she understands, just what's at stake for Seton Hall here and just understands the light that is going to be in South Orange, New Jersey for this matchup. In terms of series prediction, I think UConn's probably going to sweep the series. I think there's going to be maybe one game that's probably competitive within about 3 runs, but outside of that, I think UConn is just too good of a softball team for Seton Hall to really at least get one right now.
Man, Will is just a Debbie Downer. That's tough. Me personally, if I'm picking MVP for the series, I know Taylor Hill has the accolades from this past week, but I'm looking at Ashley Colonetta. She's 13 of her last 17 at the plate, and this past Saturday she went 4 for 5 with 3 runs scored. Just a tremendous offensive talent. Now, Taylor Hill, she's at the top of the scouting report, but I think Ashley Colonetta is going to have a strong series. And as far as series prediction, I think the Pirates can grab a game from UConn. We've seen this team put up gaudy offensive numbers throughout the season. It's not a long shot to think that Ashley Colonetta is going to have a strong game. Taylor Hill, Janae Barricado, Lauren Kai, Jenna Blevins. I think one of the games in the series is going to be very high scoring. I can see the Pirates coming away with, 12-9 final score.
Well, it's free burger and hot dog night this Friday, so I think every student will be out there to see this UConn and Pirates matchup. I'll be there for myself as well. Got to get a free burger and wish these Pirates team well. But let's go to the other side of the diamond, to this baseball team. And guys, we don't have to sugarcoat it. It was a rough start, as it took a while for this Pirates team to get 2 wins together at the top of this season. But now, sitting at 10-26, fellas, we're going to go back to your grading book, Professor Wilnir Lewis, Professor Heaven Hill. Guys, what's the grade looking like as we're halfway through this season? Professor Hill, we'll start with you.
Man, okay. You know what? I'm going to be positive. Again, I'm going to give this team a B, right? Okay. Now, sure, the record may not be the best, but, that's bound to happen when you lose several top-tier contributors. Guys like Casey Dana, Jerry Hunzinger, Tyler Shedler-McAvoy. That's like their top 3 position players from last season's lineup that went to the Big East tournament in Ohio. So all those guys left. Festa got drafted to the Twins. They lost so much talent from last year's lineup to now. A lot of moving pieces. And then non-conference play, they scheduled a bunch of ranked teams. So it's like the record is really skewed compared to, I think, the overall talent of the team. And they picked up a series win a couple weekends ago against, I believe it was Xavier. And then while they may have gotten swept by UConn this past weekend, we seen earlier this week they're picking up non-conference wins against St. Peter's and Wagner. So I'm going to go with the B. I think this team is resilient, and they've shown what it takes to win. And this past weekend, the doubleheader against UConn, that first game, you can argue the Pirates outplayed UConn. Now, while the second game may have been lopsided, I think this team is a lot better than its record states.
Well, I'm glad that you're the positive one, Heaven, because I'm not going to be that high in my grade. I'm going to give the baseball team, I'm going to go with C-. I think they're still passing. because of a lot of the points that Heaven had brought up. You know, you lose a lot of your top hitters. Like we mentioned Casey Dana, and we saw what Casey Dana did against Seton Hall in this past series against UConn for Seton Hall. You lost a lot of players, and I think that yes, you do got to acknowledge that, but I think that you also have to acknowledge the losses. 8-24 is not a great record at any stretch of the imagination. Yes, they did show that they're resilient, so if I had to go a grade at least for this past 2 weeks, I'll go a little bit higher. But I think overall, when you look at the season, you know, you want better performances. You want a team to be a little bit closer to 500. Yes, you do schedule ranked teams, but I feel like you had to schedule them for a reason because you expected a little bit more from your team coming out of the offseason. So for my grade, I'm going to go C-. Again, still passing just because they have been resilient over these past couple of weeks and did pick up that series win as well. But again, you want a lot more out of your team.
Professor Hill, I wish I was in your class the way that you're grading right now. Because a B for this team that took so long, their only win, I'll give you that it was a ranked Florida team was their first win of the year. That was very surprising. But a B right now, I need to switch into your class. But let's look out to this weekend's matchup against Creighton out in Nebraska, as things have been turning up, as both of you pointed out in your grade books. For this matchup against Creighton, another good Big East foe. How do you see them sizing up? What are some of their keys to this one? Will, we'll start with you.
Well, I think a lot of, the biggest key that we saw during these past couple of games that Seton Hall was able to play against Monmouth, against UConn in the first two games was the fact that this team was very resilient. Against Monmouth in that first game, Seton Hall was able to come back from a 7-1 run deficit that they had and was able to at least make that game a little bit closer. In that first game of the series against UConn, again, a 7-1 run deficit, they're able to come back. And then, of course, against UConn in the second game, that one being 3-2. But you could argue that, Seton Hall just caught a lot of bad breaks in that first game of that doubleheader this past Saturday. So I think that a key for them is, they understand that when they're down, they're not out. And I think that you're going to probably have that against a very good Creighton team. I would think that if you're able to at least piece together, a couple of runs in the first couple of innings to at least put the pressure on Creighton, I think that will be able to help out. And also defensively, in that first game of that doubleheader, that 3-2 game, Seton Hall really stepped up defensively. And even in the first couple of innings in that second game of the doubleheader against UConn, it was a pretty good defensive outing. They had a pretty good showing on the mound as well. But, the wheels came off the bus for Seton Hall in that sixth inning and that fifth inning, when UConn just was able to find a lot of runs to come across the plate. So for Seton Hall, you have to be able to get a complete game, and you have to be able to go back, to that defensive stalwart that you had over the last couple of games before, that 14-2 UConn loss.
If I'm looking at a key to victory for the Pirates, I think it's going to come down to the pitching this weekend. I mean, Creighton's pitching is easily the best in the conference, I'd say. I mean, for the past 3 weeks, a Creighton pitcher has claimed the top weekly honor in the Big East. This past week, Cade Lamel was the Big East pitcher of the week for the Blue Jays. And I think it's going to come down to who steps up on the mound. I mean, we've seen earlier this week the Pirates holding St. Peter's to 2 runs, shutting out Wagner as well in the first game of the doubleheader against UConn, holding the Huskies to just 3 runs in that game. So we know the pitching is capable on this team, whether it's Zane Probst, Brendan O'Neill, Michael Simoniello, even Nick Piero at times. We know the pitching is there for this team. However, there are times when control can be an issue and when things can kind of get out of hand, like we saw in the 5th and 6th innings of the second game of that doubleheader this past Saturday. So it's going to come down to whoever performs on the mound. And we know Creighton can step up because their pitchers have done it for this entire season, these past couple weeks especially. But it's going to take a lot for the Pirates to match them on the mound.
Should be a very, very fun weekend on the diamond for both Pirates teams. But unfortunately, that's going to have to wrap things up on this fun episode of Hall Talk. For my main fellows, Wilnir Lewis and Heaven Hill, professors on the way, I've been Christian Gardner. We'll catch you next time.